He ascends. Bennett snatched the creatures he'd dubbed Dark Archfiend
Sue me?
out of the air and pummeled them stupid. But no matter how many he put down, more kept coming. Claws swiped at his face. Jaws clamped onto his calves, penetrating his skin. Kicking demons off left and right, he fought forward with a burly shout toward his goal, which required finding the end of the throng. His knife was missed desperately. As Bennett imagined, the black and gray marbled blade was missing him in return, wherever it was, likely buried under a mound of debris on Trivium.
We'd grown quite close.
But now his fists were needed to pick up the offensive slack, sending blazing, coordinated strikes on what he assumed were weak spots just below the upper, larger set of legs. Each hit expelled blue vapor, packed with enough rapture to slow the demons in place. One of the techniques he'd picked up watching Hannah. The problem with the new trick was it seemed to slow him down as well after each strike.
And she's not around anymore to teach me to refine it. Can't believe this bullshit.
He pored over the last moments of her war with Joseph, causing his fists to clench tighter.
Why? Why can't we put this guy down?
The fact that there seemed no way to defeat the Wraith Chloe.
A fusing of her and the Brothers of Gehenna, who have sentience apparently,
sent pure rage ripping through Bennett, crippling his ability to create rapture and stunting him in his battle with the mindless Archfiend clan. Whatever the Wraith Chloe and the Brothers of Gehenna had done to gain the clan's obedience had made them fiercer and with less remorse. The demons also fought silently, which was unsettling as hell, as Bennett had already gotten used to talkative Archfiend. These things were more like wild nightmare beasts from some rainforest continent he never wanted to visit. Each step forward felt minuscule. His goal seemed no nearer. For what seemed like forever, he'd been fighting to reach Melissa, with little progress to show for it. She was a few yards away at most, and he was the only Rapture user nearby who could help.
I can save her. I have to.
What frightened him most was not knowing if he could even help if he was somehow able to reach her. He'd only ever healed one wound, and a broken neck was a far cry from a fence post through the chest. When Chloe killed Melissa, and Alex went limp in Bennett's hands, he, for a split second, before letting go, felt the weight of his partner's anguish, enough to stagger Bennett in the first moments of their skirmish with the Archfiend.
We were going to save her. I was going to. Wasn't I?
The moment was now a blur. Chloe had been counting down. For some reason, it seemed best to wait and negotiate, despite Alex's pleas for help.
It seemed the best way to keep her safe.
They were going to make a move on one.
I was going to get Fabian and Felix off him. It was going to work. It was. What went wrong?
Alex hadn't moved since it happened. There he sat, dotted among the chaos, in the same spot he'd been when it did, his posture stiff, somehow appearing even smaller than usual. His eyes were aimed low, locked onto Melissa's body, as though she might rise at any moment. Archfiends swept by like wild tendrils of flame, inexplicably ignoring him, possibly because they hunted by sensing Eve, and Alex's wrath had all but dissipated.
This was their plan all along. She was never gonna live through the night. I'm so sorry, Al.
The only question remaining was why the teacher had been chosen to be punished. As bad as the situation seemed, battling the horde as well as the possessed body of a Midolian, it could have been much worse. Most of the clan was being held at bay by a few well-placed maroon and canary yellow Midolian spheres provided by Fabian and Galinthia, the current MVPs in the team's tunnel defense. The only drawback was now two of their heaviest hitters were essentially taken out of the fight on the ground, leaving it up to Bennett and the others to protect them, as well as hold the line. The Wraith Chloe and her slave Archfiend could not be given an inch. Felix was allowing himself to be swarmed, which was helpful, spewing wrath in ways Bennett had never seen. His long dragon tongue whipped back and forth out of a protruding snout as he assaulted the Archfiend with a ferocity to match their own. The janitor's once pale skin had become a hard shell, as horned as a lizard's, complemented by the small tail poking out from his backside. The acid he spewed tore through the Archfiend as Felix launched himself off the canyon walls like a bullet, leaving steaming trails behind. Though Bennett didn't like seeing his amiable pal lash out like this, times were desperate, and the guy clearly had some frustrations to get out. Melissa was now only a few feet away from Bennett.
I can still save her!
Suddenly, a bang rattled him from somewhere on his left, near where Isaiah and Mara had been trying to contain Chloe. The sound of the possessed Midolian's laughter afterward was almost comforting, as it meant she hadn't stolen away into the cave. She then dropped another bomb, shouting,
"There! Ah! Do you feel it? Her life force has faded. Mrs. Barker truly is no more."
That's what Chloe was waiting for?
But Bennett didn't believe her. A gap finally opened to Melissa. He sped in and swept her up in his arms. She was cold. Pressing a hand to her chest, he forced out all of the rapture he could.
"This will work."
Think! Focus!
He pushed. The aura around them became a brilliant cone of orchid blue and sapphire. But the rapture flowed through her and out the other side, unabsorbed.
No, Melissa, come back. Hear my voice. Follow it.
Bennett couldn't accept it, but one glance at Isaiah told him the truth. She'd faded. To a human unable to sense Eve, Melissa would have seemed as alive as ever. The glow hadn't left her. Her deep green eyes were aimed at the sky, unafraid. But his new senses did not lie, and when Bennett closed his eyes, he saw no color where her aura should have been. He'd often balked whenever Alex would start into a rant about his life before Isaiah. But every word about Melissa was heard loud and clear. Bennett knew the woman in his arms' favorite food was raspberry tart with vanilla ice cream. He knew she liked to read cheesy romance novels about Spanish lumberjacks, volunteered at the homeless shelter, and preferred rainy days inside with music and coffee to sunny ones outdoors. He also understood all the better what he'd sensed from Alex when she passed. Bennett closed her eyes, laid Melissa down, and whispered, "I'm so sorry." Once she was as safe as could be, he turned his anger outward, finding two willing archfiends swooping upon him. Lighting his fists in blue fire just as the fiends tackled him, hoisting him above the fight, Bennett sent his hand through the first demon's gut, making it howl before going still and plummeting to the ground. The second fiend was forced to take over their carrying duties.
"Damn! Chloe really did a number on you guys, huh?"
Bennett asked, as the demon carried him higher, slobbering away with no life in its glossy black eyes.
Up close, you somehow get uglier. You know that?
The beast snarled and snapped at his neck.
No small talk? Fine.
Two at a time, Bennett tore off the demon's lower legs, sending it spiraling, vomiting acid as its screams overlapped with those from below. As they fell, waves of abyss and mallows surged through the area. Bennett grabbed the demon mid-air, thrusting it into the energy wave's path just in time to take the brunt of the hit, hurling them both into a nearby canyon wall, then crumbling to the ground. As rocks plunged around them, Bennett once again used the Archfiend as a shield. The beast didn't even scream as heavy, sharp stone masses crushed it into mincemeat, blocking out all light. Controlling his breathing then became a priority, as Bennett knew his claustrophobia would come on strong if he didn't. But after a brief moment, none of his old fear had returned. In fact, he felt rather safe inside his rock cocoon, protected from the abyss still lingering outside from the blast.
That shit stings.
But there was no time. Chloe could have gotten past their blockade at any second. Scorching blood oozed out of the body of the demon as Bennett fought to get out from under the rubble, soon making out footsteps, lightning fast, passing by.
That's gotta be her! Somebody stop her!
Bennett closed his eyes and saw the shape of Wraith Chloe's body, saturated in abyss, prancing unopposed toward the tunnel entrance and oblivion, laughing callously, like a child gleefully opposing their parents' wishes.
No! God damn it!
Bennett mustered his rapture, straining to lift the largest slabs off him.
Don't be a limp dick. What would Sarge say? Come on! Flex that scrote!
Gradually, the slabs lifted, finally rolling end over end, crashing to the ground among clouds of dust. He was free. Bennett immediately gave chase, wiping hot blood from his face, finding no sign of Chloe dead ahead. Wrath was then suddenly on his left side. Felix, looking more demonic by the second, kept pace, charging down the tunnel with glazed red eyes on the hunt. Wind was soon on their backs. Mara's cloak swooped on either side of Bennett and Felix as she landed behind them. Taking them by the backs of their shirts, she shouted, "Hang on!" A sphere she created wrapped over them, and Bennett was lifted from the ground, suddenly speeding down the tunnel nearly 100 miles per hour, breaking through tight gaps in its path, carving a perfect tube along the way. Seeing the tunnel zoom by, and feeling a certain end-of-the-world thrill, he couldn't help but let out a shout. Despite their speed, Chloe remained elusive. Bennett, Mara, and Felix shared skeptical glances as they coursed deeper into the earth, finally arriving at the last curve, which led to the dead stairs chamber. When the sphere carrying them leapt into the room, a cavalcade of boulders were sent collapsing behind them, closing the exit. Atop the steps, flashes of abyss whipped like tendrils of shadow out the door, striking Mara's sphere on approach. "We're going in. Stop her from opening the Brothers. Whatever it takes," Mara shouted. The sphere careened up the steps, smashed through the black doorway, and bulldozed its way through the short entry tunnel, crashing into the temple. Upon entry, it dissipated, dropping the trio to the ground, and Bennett was instantly struck by the weight of the astronomical energy ricocheting throughout the chamber. The feeling of abyss was tenfold, petrifying, mixed with enough wrath to make him seriously ill. If the fate of the planet had not been at stake, he would have definitely puked then and there. Ribbons of dust danced through the temple, illuminated by a blinding, anarchic light radiating from the plateau under the great winged statue, where 3 glowing orbs sat atop the pedestal. Looming over them in obscurity was Chloe, her hands clamped to the rocks. Loops of magenta orbited from the stones as she allowed the energy to flow through her as a conduit, cackling and screaming. "You're too late! We are here! It is done!" Mara didn't hesitate. She launched into the air and released her lance, colliding with the slate-black aura surrounding the pedestal and drawing a shriek from the sphere protecting her, as though it were crippled with pain. Chloe never lifted her hands from the stones, never needing to, as the tendrils of abyss kept Mara at bay. The first wave was fought off with her lance, but the second detonated on impact. In a flash and a bang, Mara was sent crashing into the temple ceiling. Unconscious, she plummeted to the floor, narrowly avoiding being impaled by her lance when it landed beside her. Something told Bennett that bit of bullshit was likely the final nail in the universe's custom-made coffin. He and Felix, the last 2 left, shared panicked glances before proceeding to charge the stairs. The steps were broiling, cooking Bennett's feet through the soles of his shoes, while the poisonous Eve grew exponentially more potent and demoralizing the closer they got to the platform. A typhoon of hate and shit, where any material that fell near its center disappeared from existence. Even Felix's skin was being burned away layer by layer as they ascended, and they hadn't even reached the halfway mark yet. "Felix!" Bennett couldn't help but scream, unable to hear his own voice amid the din. Fighting a few more steps, his pal was forced to turn back. "It's no use!" Felix shouted, reaching for Bennett as he passed. But Bennett pulled away.
"I'm not dead yet."
Not that he didn't desperately want to go with Felix. The abyss was not something one walked towards. It was anguish in so many more ways than just physical pain. Facing the top stairs, Bennett felt like the poster boy for desperation. But in a strange turn, the rapture responded tenfold to the emotion.
"Whoa! Well, all right."
Using the boon and subsequent clarity, he increased the armor over his body, happily watching it extend past his arms, over his shoulders, and down the rest of him. The final piece slid into place over his head and locked with a clang, and Bennett allowed himself one laugh as he instantly recognized the shape the chunks of rapture had formed. Inspired by the story that had emboldened him all his life, he'd been garbed in bulky plate armor, a fantastical, royal knight of King Arthur's court. For an unrelated reason, he also felt invincible. His pace quickened. The armor pulsed with each hit from the black tendrils, releasing a low-pitched scream, but remaining steadfast.
"Almost there! Doing it!"
Though the sheer presence of the stones nearly bowled him over, Bennett pressed on. The abyss would soon be ready to break free from the stones, where it would be amplified by the temple 1,000,000 times over, and Bennett, for the first time, began to grasp how the brothers in the abyss within them could do something as cosmically large as render all matter nil. Though he was never much for science, Bennett knew space was fucking big, and the power he was sensing atop the plateau was proving itself up to the challenge. When his vision rose above the highest step, a mess of tendrils whipped out and struck him in the chest, casting him off the stairs, flinging him into the farthest wall of the temple, where Bennett was embedded in rock.
Ah, great!
Wriggling free, he dropped 15 feet amid a rain of rocks onto his ass, startled when a few conked him on his helmet. Gazing atop the plateau, he found Felix across the way, laid up against a wall, protecting Mara, who was still unconscious. They caught eyes and nodded, a respectful acknowledgement they'd given it their best. Bennett wanted one more crack at it, but gazing at Chloe, he could sense her power was only increasing. There seemed nothing to do but wait.
It's been an okay existence, I guess.
He tried to think if there was anything he wanted to do before ceasing to be, so he scratched his balls and farted, shitting a little.
That's fine.
Melu, Raid, Ilam, show us the beauty of nothingness.
The wraith Chloe screamed, belting out one final laugh for the end of existence as the transfer grew to a fever pitch.
Yeah, good for you.
But the laugh was soon cut off, and Bennett's gaze was pulled to the left, toward the collapsed entry tunnel.
What is that?
Something was approaching, something dark and powerful. Neither Chloe nor the stones. It was pure wrath, and it was coming like a freight train just getting rolling. From what Bennett could sense, whatever it was terrified him just as much as the power of the brothers. A hot glow, orange like fire, appeared in the cracks of the boulders blocking the tunnel entrance, swelling until the blockade ruptured into millions of red-hot pieces. Bennett quickly recognized Alex's Eve signature, though he couldn't quite grasp what it was he was seeing.
Al?
A blazing fireball entered the temple, sending the temperature inside skyrocketing. Rock chunks were torn off the walls and sent spinning through the air. A dark spot in the middle of the fire appeared as a silhouette, with eyes burning like white spots on the shadowed shape, which was taking plodding steps toward the center of the room.
Al! Over here!
Bennett cried, but the teacher continued his march as though he didn't hear, and a whole new bad feeling found its way to Bennett's already sensitive gut. Chloe's voice competed for dominance over the noise of the newcomer.
Yes, Mr. Barker did it. He's found the ire, the lowest pits of despair. Now it is certain the collected dark eve of the universe will be released from this point. Existence ends tonight.
Bennett tried to wave Alex over, but he didn't seem to hear or see him, and would not divert from his path toward the stairs. The ground only remained long enough for him to complete each step before bursting into molten liquid, bubbling in Alex's wake.
That's far enough,
Chloe called, beginning to sound baffled, as Alex planted his foot on the first stair step leading to the plateau.
How are you functioning? The ire is said to be mindless. Fall.
This was part of Chloe and Joseph's plan from the beginning? If they couldn't get the job done one way, they would find someone who could do it another?
Turned out Alex was the guy, except the results didn't seem to be agreeing with Wraith Chloe. Bennett struggled towards the stairs, unable to find sure footing amid the convulsing cavern.
If I can just talk some sense into him.
Al! You can't go up there!
No response came, and Alex tramped higher, seeming more a machine running a program than a man.
Halt! We order you!
Chloe called. Again, no response. The steps collapsing behind Alex, growing into a cascade of lava, forced Bennett to back off just as he reached the base of the stairs. The walking fire with Alex inside rose into the tight walls enclosing the stairway.
That's not Al.
The cavern shook. The cave bellowed. Earthquakes mounted. Huge fissures opened in the ground, sending rushing geysers of searing steam. Bennett charged to the relative safety of the far edge of the room as Alex entered the cloud of abyss and disappeared, and the cavern went dark. It appeared he'd been swallowed, but the aura soon emerged, like a sun breaking free of a thunderhead. Alex was whole. His pace was constant. The abyss whipped at him, catching fire, sometimes striking him, melting away his granite skin, but never slowing him. Reaching the top step, his stride turned towards the pedestal. With Alex on the approach, Chloe was sounding in utter panic, the charred maliciousness in her voice intermixing with hints of her former, fragile human form.
The transfer is not complete! You are the ire! The ire is destruction! Become it! Finish your fall, damn you! Fall!
But Alex continued. Chloe was unable to pull her hands free as the brothers continued using her body as a conduit. More tendrils lashed out, simply burned away in the teacher's presence.
This is impossible!
Wraith Chloe wailed as Alex took his final, plodding steps to the pedestal. His arm rose, and he pushed a blistering, open palm into her skull. The white-hot, wrath-imbued hand simply passed through the horn and obsidian armor like a scorching knife through soft butter. Chloe's head collapsed into glowing mush over Alex's hand and spilled out, lighting the rest of the body on fire as it traveled down. A geyser of abyss ascended from the remains, creating a tower through the roof of the cavern, where the energy scattered into the atmosphere and beyond. Alex's hands reached through what remained of the Wraith Chloe's body, reducing it to liquid fire, which he seemed to play with like a child with hot taffy, before turning his attention to the stones. Lifting them, Alex remained for a moment, his head tilted, his blazing white eyes fixed, as though simply curious about them. A deafening moan then arose, eliminating all other sound and senses, as Bennett witnessed the stones in Alex's hands glow from the bottom up and begin to droop. A scream resonated from them as the abyss within them soared into the sky through the hole in the ceiling of the temple. But Alex remained, his body regenerating faster than it could be burned away by the force. The stones soon dissolved in his palms and dripped through his fingers onto the pedestal, a melting deluge over the collapsing plateau. An ensuing earthquake jostled Bennett. Across the temple, he found Felix and a semi-conscious Mara fighting to rise and get moving. A huge slab shaken loose from the wall began to topple above them before his vision was obscured by dust.
Mara!
Bennett screamed, making his way toward them, not knowing if they had been crushed or not. As he did, the temple began to fall apart, starting with the breach above Alex, coming down in sections. Through the hole, Bennett could see dim white clouds in the night sky, reminding him the world was still out there and in one piece.
Hope it stays that way.
He crossed the temple as it crumbled and saw atop the plateau Alex was now motionless. The abyss had ceased, nowhere to be seen, but something equally horrid had taken its place. The teacher's head turned up, and his body lifted limply into the air, through the opening overhead, disappearing outside. As he breached, the fiery glow around him lit the surface, turning it from night to day. The temple cavern was not going to last long. Bennett forgot about Alex for a moment and scrambled, searching for Felix and Mara. Before he could begin digging through the rubble to find them, the rock slab which fell suddenly blasted apart, revealing the pair beneath. Mara's lance was held high. Midolian spheres then began springing up all around, supporting the collapsing cavern long enough for the party to get away. Bennett felt little relief when Isaiah, Fabian, and Galinthia entered the cavern to join them.
Let's get out of here!
The old Midolian shouted. The party, encased in malospheres, were lifted toward the hole in the roof. Once they were clear, the cavern behind them finished crumbling, eclipsed by dust rising over the desert. Bennett was set down on cold sand and took a full breath, embracing the chilly desert air in his lungs. He, Isaiah, Mara, Felix, Galinthia, and Fabian had landed upon a hill facing the valley. A trail of flaming glass led to a blazing light fading over the nearby hill, where the sands were being cast through the air, sparkling with red and yellow light.
You all right?
Isaiah asked, dusting him off.
Al! I don't know what happened. The brothers and Chloe are gone.
Bennett stammered out.
I know. Well done,
Isaiah said, fighting to keep Bennett's focus with a waving hand.
I don't think they're coming back from that, which means you're officially off the hook.
What are we doing about Alex? That's him. What's happening?
Bennett sounded maniacal. He just didn't care.
Easy, cowboy,
Galinthia said.
You don't need to worry anymore. You did your part,
Isaiah said.
This part is ours.
Bennett then noticed the doleful looks on the other Midolians' faces.
You rest up, partner,
Isaiah said, giving Bennett and Felix a reverent nod before starting toward the light on the horizon, along with the others.
What are you going to do?
Bennett shouted after them. Whatever we can, Mara answered. Bennett rose and tried to follow, but Isaiah, 2 steps ahead, snapped his fingers, placing him in a clear Midolian sphere, immobilizing him.
Sorry, pal. You and Felix wouldn't last long out there. Alex is falling into the ire. The essence of destruction is going to use him to pour out like a river breaking a dam.
And you expect me to just sit here?
Bennett shouted, unwilling to accept being kept at arm's length. Before turning away, Isaiah gave him a weak grin, and in that moment, everything Chloe had said about why Bennett and Alex were chosen snapped into place.
Isaiah knew about it the whole time. He knew either of us could fall into this and end the world.
Isaiah had switched them, putting the rapture in Bennett and wrath in Alex, because he was too afraid of Bennett being the one to fall into the ire. As much as Bennett wanted to hate Isaiah in that moment, he also understood him now more than he ever thought possible. He even understood why Mara and the others had acted so hostile toward him and Alex, because they were flimsy gates keeping the entire forces of heaven and hell at bay. When the Midolians launched into the distance towards the light, Bennett was released from the sphere. He and Felix followed as closely as they could, but remained stranded a few hundred yards behind. Soaring over the fire, the Midolians came down in a square formation. Bennett was thankful for his improved vision, as he could clearly see the Midolians raise their imbued weapons and connect streams of energy, weaving a white sphere that surrounded Alex and the firestorm, blocking it from all senses. A perfect sun dug into the sand, white and opaque, muffling the volcanic squall. Bennett had no idea what it was or what to call it, but whatever it was seemed to be working.
They're trying to contain it,
Felix said, shaking his head.
but it's too much.
Bennett didn't want to dignify that negativity with a comment. Felix then dropped to his knees, lounging in the sand.
It's pointless. Wilbur is gone. That thing's a deity. There's nothing left of him.
As the Midolian bubble grew dense and concentrated, Bennett felt himself being pulled towards it, and soon realized it was the small bits of metal in his clothing being affected by a magnetic field. The white Midolian sphere pulsated, changing size and shape, as sharp, riotous clangs escaped from inside, breaking above Isaiah and the others screaming. They were giving it all they had. The sphere then expanded to twice its size before rupturing with a flash that was surely viewable from space. Neutral energy ripped across the desert, sapping rapture from Bennett, weakening his armor, while also lessening the effects of Alex and the ire, for a moment at least. The Midolians were scattered, and Bennett lost sight of them as he and Felix hit the dirt, buried under bales of sand. Lifting himself, Bennett shook like a wet dog, flinging sand out of his armor's nooks, and found the white sphere was gone. The Midolians were nowhere to be seen, but the fire surrounding Alex, ever constant, remained. His path dragged on over the next hill and into a rocky, mountainous region.
Where are you going, Al?
Bennett and Felix helped one another up, their gazes fixed on the blaze drifting away, lighting dry underbrush aflame, spreading smoldering fires across the valley. Part of Bennett wanted to drop to his knees and give up.
What can we do?
Where are the reinforcements?
Felix shrieked.
All of Unearth should be here to stop this. I honestly have no idea. If the Midolians altogether can't contain it, I don't know, man. The world really wants to end tonight.
Felix laid down in the sand and covered his face with his arm. His wrath was nearly spent. He once again looked like the gangly janitor who had risked his neck to save Bennett and Alex from the clutches of Madame Daphne. But all signs of his previous sunny disposition seemed extinguished, possibly permanently. The soldier couldn't help but agree with him.
Does seem like the world wants to put itself out of its own misery.
Every cynical thought he'd ever had suddenly seemed justified and proven. and the sand next to Felix was looking disgustingly inviting. Yet Bennett found his legs moving him onward. He wanted to stop focusing and let the armor down, even if just for a second. Yet it refused, and only burned brighter around him. From deep within himself, Bennett felt a warm light coursing up his throat, until it expelled itself as an assertive laugh, shocking him. His gaze then found its way to the dark sky.
Must be early morning by now.
On the eastern horizon was the faintest hint, no more than a foggy sliver of royal blue.
No,
He said.
it doesn't feel like the end. Fuck if I know why, but it doesn't.
That sun's gonna rise, he said. Without a second thought, he started down the hill toward the burning dot on the horizon.
Are you serious? What are you going to do?
Felix asked.
Don't know.
Bennett called back.
Whatever I can.
Alex died with his wife. You're just gonna get yourself roasted.
Along with everyone else, apparently. So I'll just jump in head first and let you know how it feels, yeah?
Bennett had no intention of taking this lying down.
Hannah wouldn't. Somewhere in that thing's a 4th grade teacher who just watched the love of his life die. And he's hurting. I'm not gonna let him go through this alone.
Good luck!
Felix called. Bennett nodded, knowing he would need it, and trudged on, feeling a deep fatigue set in. His body revealed with each step how broken it had become, and the reality was becoming clear that he would not likely survive a maneuver as stupid as this, successful or not. As a torrid wall of flame approached, he turned his mind to thoughts of his brother, Jerry, his mother, his team in the Corps, Autumn, the woman he'd assaulted the day he shot himself, Hannah, Alex, and even his truck. All of his best ammunition to activate his rapture. Once in the fire, Bennett found the bright center of the storm was rising, scaling the mountain. Wrath raged around him as he marched on, and bolts of red electricity tore across the sky.
Only going to get one shot at this.